Our second speaker tonight is Jeff Sanders. Jeff's introduction says that his speech tonight is project number 1, the folktale in the Toastmasters Advanced Manual called Storytelling, which I found to be a very challenging manual. The title of his folktale is Adventure on the Road. He says that rather than sharing a classic old children's folktale, he created his own tall tale in an attempt to appeal to a more mature audience. Sadly, they couldn't make it, so he'll be speaking to us instead.
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters. Every 2 or 3 years, I have the opportunity to set up and guide a 4-day whitewater rafting trip on the Lower Road River in Southern Oregon, Pacific Northwest. We usually do this for about 4 days, and what's unique about this particular river is that it goes through wilderness areas. There are no roads, there are no telephones, there's no electricity. You can't call for help. You're stuck. From the time you start, you go through this about 40 to 42 miles, you're strictly in the wilderness. That presents, well, this, and it's also a very deep canyon. The Rogue Canyon has been carved out by the Rogue River over hundreds of thousands of years, so it's very deep, and then it's all heavy growth timber up on either side of the canyon. And also a lot of class 2, 3, and 4 rapids. We typically go with about 15 or 20 people, and we take 3 rafts and usually about 5 or 6 kayaks. We carry all the gear we need to eat and drink. We have 2 coolers of beer for every cooler of food, so we do pretty good that way. And we have all of our camping gear and so on. This particular trip last summer was very unusual, but there is a lot of wildlife on the river. So the second morning, we were floating. We got going and packed up about 10 a.m. and we're floating down the river. And I look up, I hear this osprey doing his typical squawk as they're hunting around the river. And he's just floating up above me, and all of a sudden, he tucks in his wings, dives into the water about 50 feet in front of me, disappears, comes back out of the water, flopping his wings, and he's got a nice big steelhead stuck in his talons. And he just took off. It took him a while to get going with the extra weight. He just took off. And that was one of the most amazing wildlife scenes I'd ever seen in my life, because it just happened right in front of my face. Until later that day, about 2 hours later, we're coming around a bend in the river, and about 50 yards ahead of us, there's this big brown thing on the side of the river, which looked like we thought was a bear. So we pull over into an eddy on the side. We kind of want to watch to see if it's a bear, maybe get some pictures or whatever. Everyone else had already gone downriver. So it was just me and Mary in the boat. All of a sudden, this bear stands up. And it was about 7 feet tall and had long arms. It looked more like a man. But this man had hair. Could it be? What were we really looking at? We were looking at Sasquatch. It was the most incredible thing. We could not believe it. So we're sitting there trying to get the cameras out and take a picture of him and everything, and he's looking in the river. He didn't know we were there. He never saw us. And all of a sudden, he jumps into the river. He comes out of the water with this 4-foot sturgeon flopping in his arms. He throws it over on the rocks, picks up a rock, smacks it on the head, kills it, and reaches down and starts to grab on the gills so he can get some food. Little did he know, and we just saw on the other side of the river, down to the bank comes this big black bear. And the black bear, you could tell, he already had a scent of that sturgeon. And he didn't even hesitate. He slipped into the water, and they're great swimmers, swam across the river, came up on the bank about 25 feet upstream from the Sasquatch, and he never even saw him. Shook all the water off, and Sasquatch heard him. He turned around, saw him there, picked up the fish, started running towards the woods. The bear came after the Sasquatch, jumped on his back, knocked him down. He dropped the fish. The bear grabbed the fish by the tail, started pulling it towards the river. Sasquatch ran into the woods. We were thinking, that is incredible. We could not believe what we were seeing. But I was surprised that Sasquatch didn't put up a bit of fight for that food. Well, to our surprise, less than a minute later, here comes Sasquatch out of the woods. He's got like an 8-foot dead tree trunk, walking out towards the bear. He comes up to the bear didn't see him, smacked him on the head, knocked him over, grabbed the fish, and started running into the woods with the fish again. Well, the bear was stunned, but he got up, came running after Sasquatch, jumped on him, and they started tumbling around in the sand. I don't know what I was thinking, but I jumped out of the raft, and I ran over to them, thinking I could maybe do something. I didn't want to see a Sasquatch. He might be the only one left in the world to be killed by a bear. So I picked up the stick, the tree trunk, and I smacked it down between Sasquatch and the bear. And they stopped, and they looked at me as in surprise. And I was surprised that they stopped. And I kept moving this back and forth, spreading them back, yelling back at them to back up, and they kept moving backwards and created just enough space. Like they anticipated something. They didn't move. They sat and looked at me. I walked up to the sturgeon, pulled out my knife, cut it in half, took half of the sturgeon, threw it over towards the water for the bear. He went over, threw the other half to Sasquatch. He picked it up and ran back into the woods. Thinking, boy, I better get out of here while the getting's good. So as I'm turning around to go to the raft, I looked at where Sasquatch went into the woods, and I thought, I got to see where he went. This is amazing. So I peer over to the woods and I look behind the trees on the tree line, and there he is, and he's not alone. There's 2 more Sasquatches there. One of them about his size, and the other one maybe half Sasquatch size, like a teenage Sasquatch. And they were all eating pieces of this fish. It was an amazing sight. So I figured he looked up at me, and he just stared at me the whole time. And I thought, oh, I better get out. So I went back to the boat. Mary's in the boat going, what was that all about? Are you crazy? I said, I think I might be, but she goes, well, let's get out of here before something else happens. And so we hop in the raft. I row back into the flow of the river. We start floating down the river, and off to the side, here's the big old black bear eating on this sturgeon, and he just stopped for a second. He looked up at us, didn't pay much attention, went right back to eating, and down the river we went. We had to go find our friends. And they had been waiting for, it was probably about 20 minutes. So we got down there, and they had been pulled off on the side of the river on a couple of turns, and they were like, where have you guys been? What happened? Is everything all right? I told them the whole story of what happened about Sasquatch and the bear. And they chuckled in disbelief, just like you probably will. And we continued our adventure on the road.